Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hi everybody, I'm Wingnut and this is my channel According to Wingnut, where I talk about just about anything really. That's according to me. But one of the things that I shared with the last video was, which was the first one on this channel. So if this is your first time watching, go back and watch that one. I know it's a long one, it's an hour long, but I had a lot to say. And I showed you my dad and stuff like that. For those of you that don't know me, I'm originally from California. I'm a California contractor. I'm born and raised there. Spent 33 years there working the trades the best I could, right? In California, it's pretty competitive, and you're hard pressed to land really good jobs that pay well because, you know, there's a lot of, well, let's just say there's a lot of illegal activity that goes on in California, whether it's somebody coming in illegally or they're cutting your wages, everybody's wages, because they undercut everybody else, and only to have somebody come back and redo the job right because it never passed inspection and so on and so forth. So it actually makes it a lot more expensive for the consumer, right? In so many ways. But whether it's more taxes, more fees, more regulation, more all of that. Anyway, side note, completely. Let alone having all your tools ripped off on a fairly regular basis if you're not careful. So, but having spent my life there, I wasn't planning on coming out to Minnesota for good. But on May 17, 2023, I came out here to visit my dad for 3 weeks because my sister, brother-in-law, and their entire clan of 4 adult children, as well as a couple of boyfriends and girlfriends, as well as a couple of infants, all went to Europe, 9 of them, to spend a couple of weeks in Europe. Again, this has been like third, fourth, fifth one that I'm aware of. So I came out here, and when they were gone, they weren't able to intercept the mail that was coming to Dad's. They lived 2 doors down. And so we were starting to get mail that was quite concerning. When they came back, we confronted the brother-in-law with that. His name is Mark. We confronted Mark with that, and he just made an excuse and ran out the door. Didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to face it. Then he was calling, finding out when I was leaving. When are you leaving? When am I booking the flight for so you can leave? So on and so forth. So anyway, there was a lot of that. And then I told him I wasn't leaving because in that 2 weeks that they were gone, I had also taken Dad to the hospital, or taken him to the doctors a few times, because he was really declining from the previous time I was here, and there was just something not right. And the fridge was packed full of McDonald's, like a lot, an inordinate amount. Mind you, Mark, Maria, their kids, everybody, even the boyfriend and the girlfriend that were shacking up in the house, they all worked at McDonald's because he was the store manager. And so they were feeding him an inordinate amount of McDonald's, which I had told them in previous visits, please stop, because he's been suffering with really bad swelling of the lower legs. In fact, it was so bad that he was putting his legs in ice buckets every night to combat the swelling and the pain. He was in a lot of pain. So, fast forward, I'm here in May of 23, and it's still ongoing. The fridge is even fuller, packed more with, the McDonald's. And so when they got back, I told them again, do not give him any more McDonald's. Oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. It's good food, it's healthy food. Well, then he came, like the day after, he came home from the trip. A day or two later, he came back from work and he had another 10-quart bag full of McDonald's. Like, people would call in an order and then not pick it up, or the order was wrong, so they'd remake it. So they're supposed to throw it away. They're supposed to write it down on a sheet and get rid of it. But what he was doing was bringing it home to Dad. As a result, his health just had declined so much. I was taking him to the doctors, and at first the doctors were thinking, maybe this is cancer, because he has prostate cancer, and his numbers were a little elevated, and things were just wrong with him in so many different levels. But his sodium was through the roof, as you can imagine. And they actually thought it was cancer. Fast forward another week or so, test results came back, and they did a bunch of scans. They were looking for different things. They found a couple of dark spots, which could be ulcers and this and that, or cancer spots. And turns out, after a bunch of weeks of testing, that it really wasn't cancer. It was the really high sodium. It was destroying him, which then led to, in the meantime, we were discovering that Dad's bank account, he was locked out of his bank account. He was locked out of his American Equity Trust account. He couldn't get access to anything because he's not very tech savvy, right? He's 94 years old now. But at that point, he was still 91. Still not tech savvy. He had a flip phone, and even half the time that didn't work well because, whatever. So we're finding all this stuff. His bank accounts, we got 2 years worth of back monthly statements, and that's when we started discovering stuff. And long story short, my brother-in-law was... their house was raided like Mar-a-Lago, and he was charged with 14 felony counts for theft. Now, the police report, which took a year to complete, recommended things like several counts of fraud, several counts of elder abuse for financial gain, several counts of, just a lot of different things. And then they were going to charge my sister with accessory, felony accessory. Because primarily they felt like that Mark was the one who was running the whole thing. And my sister may or may not have understood where anything was coming from. However, you don't enjoy $420,000 in the matter of 5 to 7 years and not know where it's coming from. You just don't. So they know she's guilty. In fact, some of the documents that were written out that they manipulated Mom and Dad into changing years ago were written out by her in her handwriting. So, yeah, with signatures that they don't think were Dad's. So anyway, lots of forged checks monthly, just a lot. There was so much. It took them a year of investigating and digging through. They would take thousands of dollars every month out of Dad's account after phoning into the equity fund to have it wire transferred across state lines. So there was interstate commerce involved. But that was then deposited into his trust account here, which they had access to because they knew all his information. And then he would monthly forge these checks and cash them in his own account or run them through his kids' accounts. So there were a couple of instances where that happened that the evidence showed. So Madison was one of them. I think Joshua was another. Joseph may have been, although I don't know. So those particular details, even though the police know what they are, they ran some of the stuff by us, but didn't give us a full picture until much later. So as all of that was going on, I was getting Dad to the doctors a lot. And then when we learned, this was beginning of July, we learned that Dad, he didn't have a heart attack or a coronary when it was confirmed that all of this stuff was going on, but his intestines twisted up from all the anxiety and all of that. So he ended up in the hospital, and on July 4th, 2023, he had emergency surgery to open him up and untwist his intestines. They were hoping they didn't have to cut anything, and they didn't, other than his abdomen. And then he spent 10 days in the hospital recuperating from that. At that time, they raided their house 2 doors down. Unbeknownst to us, we had no clue that was going on, but they found in all this time that he's denying everything, he's denying, yet they found a blank check that he had already signed, his signature, with my dad's information on it, and it just hadn't been filled out yet. To whomever, just in case, they found Dad's credit card for Home Depot on his nightstand because he had just ordered a $2,700 refrigerator that when we got home from the hospital, I could look out there and watch them deliver this brand new refrigerator in the house. So, of course, the police were notified about that. Pictures were taken, video, all of it. Because in all this time, I had set up cameras and stuff just to make sure that Dad was safe and that we were safe. But all this process to finally getting sentenced on December 30th of 25, 2.5 years is how long this took. So I wanted to read, I know that was a lot already, I wanted to read our victim impact statement that we shared with the court right in front of Mark and giving it to the judge. And this is how it went. Your Honor, my name is Patrick Van Leeuwen, and I speak today for myself and, gosh darn it, it jumped on me. I'm going to put it in presenter mode. Okay, my name is Patrick Van Leeuwen, and I speak today for myself and my 94-year-old father, Peter Van Leeuwen, who asked me to share this on our behalf. And he was standing right next to me when I read this because we had been working on this statement for months. It's gone through several iterations. As his son, I am also his caregiver, protector, legal power of attorney, in fact. Mark tried to claim he had power of attorney, but he did not. He never had power of attorney. He had a power of attorney in case Dad became incapacitated. Dad's never been incapacitated. So that's the only time that would have possibly kicked in if I wasn't here or Maria wasn't here. But regardless. As well as the trustee for the now drained Van Leeuwen Family Trust. 958 days ago, I came from California for what was supposed to be a short visit. What we discovered changed our lives forever. My father was in severe medical decline, living in fear of my sister and brother-in-law, Mark Rippey, and still truly unaware of what had been happening with his finances. When Mark and their entire clan of 9, all adults and 1 great-grandchild, left the country for another European vacation to several countries, My father and I finally saw mail that they had been intercepting, and I also realized he was still being fed an unhealthy diet of McDonald's despite previous pleas to stop. I'm going to stop right there. Mind you, the police and us had a suspicion that all the McDonald's was part of the plan, that they were trying to, without saying it directly, but they were hoping that his decline would end in a death so that they would not get caught doing all this until it was too late, right? To where we couldn't do anything about it through lawyers and all that, because then it would only be a civil matter after his death. But God has an amazing way of bringing things to light when people are doing wrong. Let's just put it that way. It continues. Doctors ultimately confirmed that his medical declining condition was caused by an extremely high sodium food he was routinely given while still needing to put his legs in 5-gallon ice buckets of water every night to combat the excruciating pain and swelling because he was being fed primarily high sodium daily. He was being tortured. My father was terrified, sobbing, as he explained that he suspected his declining health and financial issues were somehow connected. He's a very astute man, and he's a very faith-filled, prayerful man. He knows when something's not right. As he begged me to stay and protect him, Dad feared for his life and knew in his decline he couldn't fight off my sister if she had become violent again, as many previous years of police records can show. Soon after, we learned that aside from the money authorized to cover elementary private school, there were additional hundreds of thousands of dollars that had been removed from his various accounts. My father is an extremely frugal man who worked his whole life saving every penny to nearly $1 million in assets for his retirement. Yet bank equity funds and police records show that Mark had been draining Dad's accounts to fund a lifestyle far beyond his own capable means. Luxury cars, expensive trips, top-tier everything, appliances, gaming computers for him and the kids, a huge saltwater aquarium. Those things are expensive, just so you know. One of several European trips for all 9 of his clan. The last one costing $32,500 and so much more. The day after they got back from the trip, we were invited over for dinner. Mark and Maria and the other kids were still upstairs. And Joseph, the oldest son, was playing on the ground with his baby. And we walk in and said, "Hey, you're back. How is everything? How was the trip?" And Joseph said, "Yeah, it was fine. It was great. I mean, it was tiring. We ran and ran and ran, but we saw a lot." And Dad said, "Man, that must have been an expensive trip." And he says this, "Yeah, Dad sat down last night at the desk and added everything up, and it came to $32,500. And you could tell his face kind of went white. It's like he knows there's no way that they make that kind of money working at McDonald's. Continuing with the statement. Mark's actions had nothing to do with the lie he stood before you at the last hearing to say that he was just trying to feed his family. They were all adults in their 20s with a minor grandchild of theirs living under one roof. They refused to eat leftovers and threw out tons of food weekly in Dad's trash cans while refusing to pay for their own trash cans. This was way more than just theft, Your Honor. At a very minimum, it was extreme elder abuse for financial gain, fraud, forgery, on a monthly basis for several years. The police investigation confirmed systematic withdrawals of huge sums of cash, many unauthorized lines of credit, like 10, and a mortgage taken out on my father's fully paid off home so Mark could pretend to look like a big shot driving around town in a Porsche, all without any personal wherewithal to do so. The thousands of details would make any sensible person's stomach turn at the cruelty of it all. As my sister's henchman, which this was pure evil by a con artist. As my sister's henchman, this was pure evil by a con artist. Mind you, Mark isn't smart enough to do this all on his own. My sister probably was much of the brains behind all of this. That's why they wanted to indict her as a co-conspirator or as an accessory, because she is just as guilty. They really believe that, but here's the issue: provability. The financial exploitation was accompanied by emotional manipulation, intimidation, neglect, and outright abuse that left my father frightened for his safety and his life. When he learned the truth, the stress sent him to the emergency room with life-threatening complications. He didn't have a heart attack or a coronary, but because of the extreme shock and trauma, his intestines literally twisted up like two snakes fighting, needing emergency surgery on July 4th, 2023. Because the entire Rippey family, 8 adults and a couple of babies, lived only 2 doors away, now all behaving very unpredictably, the police advised my father that he was very unsafe alone. I had no choice but to remain in Minnesota to care for him. In doing so, I had to abandon my life in California, my home, my business, my friends, my community, and my own financial stability. As a remodeling contractor, I was forced to abandon ongoing construction jobs while also walking away from a 6-figure project that was about to start, leaving me in huge liability risk. I've personally lost 2.5 years of income and depleted my own savings to help Dad and I to get through this time together. I suddenly became an unpaid full-time caregiver overnight. Yeah, I had to leave everything behind. All my friends, my whole support system, my church family, everything. All my tools, everything. I lived for the first 105 days here with just the backpack that I came with for a couple of weeks. So 5 pairs of underwear, 5 pairs of socks, 5 t-shirts, a couple of pairs of jeans, a couple of pairs of shorts, and then the shoes that I had on. That's it. That's all I had. And toiletries, right? That's all I really had with me. And that's what I spent the first 105 days with until I sent for some friends to send me some stuff from my place. So I had them send me some clothes, some jackets and some winter clothes, because it was starting to get, fall and winter by the time that stuff got there. My father lost way more: his health, his sense of security, his dignity of independence, his trust in his own daughter, her husband Mark, and her family, let alone the pride of having a financial foundation Dad spent a lifetime building after immigrating to this country legally with only a dream, a new bride, and a few $100s, not even knowing the English language. Although Dad's health has now improved significantly, no more ice buckets after just a few weeks of my arrival and implementing health changes, that and the fact that he is now safe keeps him going. He survived several close calls during World War II in Holland, even bullets flying past his head, only to find the worst threat of his life come from his own family members 2 doors down. The emotional trauma of this remains just as profound. Even with attending daily church mass in exercising his faith, he still has nightmares. We both do. He still cries unprovoked at the thoughts and memories, let alone the grief of lost relationships, lost hope, and all the lost opportunities of the last 2.5 years he should have been able to enjoy with his grandkids and great-grandkids. We will suffer this long-term effect for many years to come. We are left wondering why his adult grandchildren have blocked all contact, surely unaware of the lies that they have been told to them. We want to believe they are just victims in this scheme too. Our entire family has been shattered. Holidays have never and will never be the same. Pure evil greed has destroyed so much more than we can even write for this statement. Added to all that injury throughout this process of 958 days, we have seen zero remorse from Mark or my sister. Even in this courtroom before you, you had to practically pry a confession out of this con man. Through probative questions, he was so reluctant to clearly answer without vomiting excuses, minimizing his actions, while lying under oath at the last hearing. The plea deal before us feels far too insignificant, even pathetic, compared to the gravity of what they did to our family. Financially, emotionally, and physically, to a vulnerable, elderly, good man, a righteous man. Let alone what Mark did to his own family, including his own adult offspring and grandkids. If he were a man of any integrity, he would have at least tried to make everything right years ago now, instead of telling lies before this court. We believe the probation period should last until the full restoration amount is paid, which is only a fraction of what was actually stolen, and that the consequences should reflect the seriousness of the crimes. 14 felony counts of just theft, now reduced to only 1? We had suggested that Mark do weekends in jail instead of a long stints in prison, as a sign of mercy and to give him the opportunity to expectantly pay back the Van Leeuwen Family Trust. But just 1 weekend in jail, that's not even a good time out in a corner, let alone a slap on the hand. We expected multiple years suspended hanging over his head, not just days. This is just sickening. What Mark faces today is not justice, nor does it send the appropriate message to the community of elder abuse victims that reporting crimes such as this amounts to any sort of deterrent, example of justice, or furtherance of safety within the community of the elderly that the court's own website cites. This sentence is almost like a reward. Mark still gets to drive around town in a stolen Porsche instead of returning it to the man who actually paid for it. Our anger is only reignited at this result, while we still try to grapple with the unfair position that the DA is trying to balance justice in the form of paying back the family trust versus this feckless justice in the form of meaningful punishment. Gone are the days of when they would hang a horse thief for stealing a $25 horse. The Bible has a story called the prodigal son, where the son went to his father and basically told him that he wished he was dead. He asked for half of his inheritance. Mark and his family lived as though dad was already dead. At least in the biblical story, the prodigal son comes to a place of self-imposed sentence, returns in humility and asks for forgiveness in an act of repentance. That has never happened in this case. Despite all of this, my father and I have chosen to forgive, not because the harm is small or excusable, no way, but because we need healing and peace for ourselves and for freedom, life, and love to be given a chance to return to us. Forgiveness does not absolve them of their crimes, nor does it remove accountability. We expect consequences like repayment from a distance for our protection. But forgiveness allows us to relinquish our rights to revenge, and it simply allows us to begin accepting the gross resemblance of closure, which will bring eventual healing, while trusting that true justice will ultimately still come as it truly belongs to God. Thank you, Your Honor, for letting us share. So I shared this, and it did land a bit of an impact in the courtroom. Not much of one not enough to sway the judge into adding a couple more felonies to his. I mean, she could have done that. She could have added more time to the probation. He's on 5 years probation. He has to pay restitution in a pretty significant amount every month for at least the duration of his probation, which is 5 years. And then what the balance that they are pursuing just under $180,000 of restitution. So the balance then, another $50,000, $60,000, will turn into a civil judgment beyond the 5 years. If he is smart and he pays every month the amount that he's supposed to pay, I mean, it's public knowledge. It's if anybody can look it up on the I guess the court documents and stuff like that. He's got to pay $2,000 a month back to the family trust. If he makes those payments every month for those 5 years, his probation will end, and then the rest that's owed will convert into a civil judgment against him that he cannot file bankruptcy against. He can't get out of it. So anything that he, the IRS can go after it. They can charge it against his account. They can take his taxes or any refunds coming in. All of that. So he can't sell any assets unless it's, especially through an escrow, without it being an issue. What sucks, though, is that I will be the one having to pursue that and not the state necessarily. I have to be the clanging cymbal, so to speak, ringing the bell that this is what's going on and pursuing it. But that's only if he screws up along the way and doesn't make his payments, because what they can do, probation department can extend that. They can actually convict him again for violating his probation and adding more time. So on one hand, I mean, I don't wish that on anybody, but he can be in this system for years and years and years if he just starts to play stupid games. So my hope is that he doesn't, and he just sticks to what they are requesting of him to do, because honestly, he got off scot-free, basically. He was looking at 145 years in prison. Seriously. If each one of those 14 felonies were to stick, if he had taken this to trial, this could have been fought and litigated in trial, and he could have been found guilty of all of them, and each one because this was his first offense and he didn't have prior records. Each one carried a 7-year sentence or something like that, but a maximum of 20 years per felony. So he could have faced 20 years for each one of those. I don't know. So I was told it would have been minimum 145 years for all of those. But regardless, this is where we're at today. The whole reason I'm putting these videos out is to get people to understand that your own family members will screw over your elderly folk in a heartbeat. And so if you are so-called trusting the people who are overseeing them, even if they're siblings of yours, please, please, please make sure that they are doing it right. Have full transparency. Make sure that you can see what's going on. Make sure that you may not be the executor of the estate, or you may not be, the power of attorney, but as a sibling, you should be able to ask those questions, and they are required to be able to produce those documents and produce the evidence and show the bank accounts that things are being run properly. Because if not, there can be major, major issues. When our story broke nationally, especially all over the state, our neighbors were coming up, "Hey, is this your story?" Yes, it is our story. The same thing happened to me. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. A little old lady around the corner here on our street told us that her own son and daughter-in-law were taking all of her money and squirreling it away and spending it on cars and things for their kids. Same scenario. I told her, you've got to report it. She said, "Oh, I can't do that. It's my family." Look, you can't pick your blood relatives. You can't. But here's the thing. You can set up healthy boundaries, and you can protect yourself, even from your blood relatives. That is your right and your responsibility. You can choose how much time you spend with those people, right? So I think it's imperative, and that's one of the reasons why I'm putting this out there. And I'm hoping to work on some legislation with some local leaders, whether it's state representatives or whatever, to try and draft some legislation to make it to where it becomes more of an important issue to police departments, because we are lucky in a sense that the amount was so high, because a lot of times you bring this stuff to a police department and they say, "That's a civil issue. We're not going to look at that." Well, that's not a criminal issue. That's a civil, that's between family members. We're not going to touch that. Sucker please. There's got to be legislation that requires them to look into it, because these older folks need to be protected. That's just the way it is. They have to be protected. So do your due diligence. Get the word out there. Look into your family's affairs. If you have elderly grandparents that are being overseen by, a group home or a sober or a what are they called? Assisted living or whatever. Or you have family members that are invalid inside your home or their home, and you have outside resources coming in to help them inside their home. Make sure that anything that can be taken is put away somewhere and behind lock and key. Because these people, I hear of all kinds of like nurses and care people coming into homes and stealing stuff right from underneath them. Stealing cash right off of dressers, or finding it in their drawers or whatever, and the help, the paid help that insurance is paying them to come take care of them and just take their vitals or whatever and then leave, they're going around ripping them off. And so Be careful with that kind of stuff. Be vigilant in watching out for them. Protect the elderly. That is just our primary. You know, the fifth commandment says, honor your father and mother, right? Take care of the most vulnerable. The Bible talks about that throughout Scripture. Protecting the elderly, taking care of the widow, taking care of the elderly, respecting the elderly, listening to them and their wisdom because they have lots of it. Don't just assume that they're crazy because they're not. Even if they have dementia, they're not crazy. They still have a lot of wisdom. Doesn't mean they won't pop off with something that's funny or doesn't quite fit right, but there's a lot of wisdom in there. Anyway, God bless you guys. I really hope this video helps. I just want to get this out so that people, it's also healing for me to be able to talk about this. Till the next one, where I go over the details of the sentencing. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great one. Bye.